Hello, good morning. Welcome in to another episode of Good Morning NASDAQ. I'm your host, Dom, with Clover Trading, joined today by the wonderful, by the newly 29, Mr. Michael Hudson. How are we
Ah,
doing this morning?
great. Feel great. Feel like, a new year has begun. Um,
The
and it was
last,
good.
the last of our 20s.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even think of it like that, but you're totally right.
This is the last October 23rd that you're going to have as a 20-something.
That's a little scary.
Every day from here on out till your next birthday, I can say the same thing. Um, I still got like half a year left before I have to deal with that mental block. But welcome in everybody. It is the 23rd day of October 2023. We got Ramon, we got Logan, we got Thomas, Elliot, Happy Days, Daria, Lauren. Welcome in, welcome in. This is our free show that we do every single morning, 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, right here on the Clover Trading YouTube channel. Pretty simple. We go over the hottest movers of the day, talk about the overall theme in the small cap world, and what we're doing to adapt. And all that we ask in return from you is that you hit that like button, that you hit it hard, that you go on and sign on to several different accounts and you hit it again. Then you tell your friends, hit that like button. And all we ask is that we're at a 2-to-1 ratio to viewers to likes. Pretty simple. So right now, just by mathing it, we are not at what we need for likes. I will be asking again if we don't hit these numbers. So just know that every time you sign in, it would greatly appreciate. We would greatly appreciate it, and be ever grateful to you for hitting that thumbs up button. All right, new morning. Where should we start, my friend? Should we take a look at the overall market and see? Because I was looking last night, and it looked
Yeah,
pretty scary going into the end of the week.
what I kind of remember from what was Friday, which feels like an eternity ago after a birthday weekend, um, was I really didn't like the action out there. Like there were a couple setups. There was money to be made. There was liquidity to be extracted and setups to be had. None of them were, necessarily layups. There were a couple difficult ones. Uh, I remember just not liking the action, not liking the gappers, not liking the setups that I had in front of me. Uh, and I took it pretty easy that day and left as soon as I could. And it kind of correlates with what the SPY is doing, right? We've said it before. Like there's been a lot of circumstances where when you have, a good rebound in the SPY, you get setups. And it looks like we had a good, week and a half of setups, and it's kind of died down. I mean, it felt like there was like that gut wrenching shot on Friday, at least to me, in my opinion, where it was like, whoa, like the 700% gapper syndrome is gone, and we're back to like market as usual, and it's time to preserve what we made instead of keep pushing. That's how I really felt on Friday.
Yeah, and I was just kind of going off of the overall SPY, kind of like 3 straight days right back into 420. We're opening in the 419s right now, so it's always, not something we talk about all too often, just with the direction of the overall market, but it is important just to keep tabs on it. Where are we at big picture in terms of, if you drew your lines on the daily chart of the SPY, which ones are we holding, which ones are we working towards either support or resistance. And right now we're working towards a pretty key level of support. And we'll see going forward if that holds. If not, we do continue to trend lower. We might get less plays or less liquidity over in small cap land, but you never know. That's not Bible. So it's just something to be aware of. So we're going to start this Monday with that, and then we'll go right into our gappers because we do have some gappers today. We have LMDX is our first one. We'll pull up the dilution tracker info real quick. 90 million float. Overall risk of dilution is high. I couldn't find news, so if anyone else has news, please let me know. Did you find it? I couldn't find any anywhere.
LMDX.
Low price stock, top left to bottom right overall. Not too much going on big picture. We have a resistance line from some volume in June, right in this 50-cent area. So nice to see whole dollar, half dollar level there. And if I go further back, really not too much that is all that interesting that is anywhere close to current price levels. So pretty clean daily chart, just that level at 50 cents. And the stock's up 276% right now, so pretty big mover. And it looks like it kind of drifted up at the end of after hours before completing this mega gap up this morning. Low price stock, something we've seen a lot of just with how beaten down all of these stocks are over the last few years. Don't necessarily always need news. There might be news here that we just can't find. But wait, I did find news. It was 2 days ago. That makes sense now because it was the weekend. They partner with AstraZeneca and Everton in the community to set up England's first heart and lung screening hub. Seems pretty early in the process there. But market is responding. What do we think here, Huddy?
Tough to really want to do anything with it. Too cheap to really go after it as a short. Gapping up 150, 200%, kind of 30-cent ticker. A lot of these will inevitably fail, just given the nature of how baggy they are. So not much for me to do, but I would 8 cents to 30. I would imagine this fails.
Yeah, that's something we've definitely seen as a trend over the last month or two. A lot of these cheap stocks, 30 to 50 cents, even when they are up this much, you tend to see some sort of little squeeze out in the morning, some little push, and then these have been fading harder than stocks over $1 on those gap up days when they do fail, just because they are a little more worthless than the ones in the $1 to $10 range. Yeah, hard for me to want to buy a stock up 270%. Hard for me to want to short a stock that is 33 cents. So it's kind of in a pickle there. Rooting for it to succeed. Maybe go up to that 50-cent area, consolidate for a few days, and maybe we have a multi-day setup. But definitely not in the price range or really anything else that would make me all that interested on day one. The other gapper we have is another 100+ percenter, INVO.
Yes.
2.3 mil float. 7.9 months of cash left. INVO Bioscience and NAYA Biosciences announced definitive merger agreement to establish expanded publicly traded life science company. Dig into that.
Reverse merger.
I
think traditionally I've never really liked merger news.
No.
Just as a whole, always just kind of a weird one. So it kind of goes on an ignore sheet for me because again, there's just like mathematical equations that I just don't know how to do, and I don't care to do because it's not part of my system or my strategies. So yeah, reverse mergers have always been kind of an avoid. It's a low float. It looks like it spiked in the past. Obviously, back in July, we had a move from the 2s to the 7s. I don't even remember this move. Do you? I guess I was in Europe.
No, I'm sure it's probably reverse split. It did 2 months ago. 1 for 20.
Gotcha. So maybe dilutive stock, maybe an attempt to pump it up and get more shares sold. Either way, I don't think the future is great for INVO, but what it does today, I'm not sure.
This is why I loved having Schwartzy on, because he knew his news and he knew what all these articles meant. Yeah, there is a lot of math to be math. There's a lot of transactions like, certain shareholders of one side will receive a certain amount of shares for each share of the other stock. It's basically a big math game that I would rather not. When you don't know enough information, or if you don't understand the information, sometimes it's better just to bow out and accept that stocks are allowed to move without you playing them. That's really all I got to say about that. I just don't understand that type of news enough to really go after it, and that's why I tend to avoid a lot of day one stuff. Even when there's news I really understand, you never quite know how it's going to react. And I really don't, I'm not like a bang, bang reactive type trader who, how long has this been trading for? What is it? Not even an hour now. I really like days of information to be given to me before I attack. That's why I really like multi-day setups. Stuff that's been running for 3 to 5 days. We have clear levels of support and resistance. I know who's involved, which players, how many shorts are getting stuck, how interested are people to chase. It's hard to gather all that information on day one or the morning of. And with this type of news, you never really know what it's going to do. Is merger, which buyout, which ones that just stay at that same price when they're bought at a certain share price?
Yeah.
And this is more complicated.
Yeah, it's this is a little bit different than that. Like, two companies are kind of merging and one's going to end up with shares of the other or whatever it is. Whereas like another one's more of like a takeover or a buyout, which is like a specific price and the stock's not going to move because that's what the company's worth. Acquired is different.
Acquisition.
So yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point there. There is, the market is vast and there's going to be a lot of different, scenarios thrown your guys' ways. And the most important thing is to kind of focus on the things that you can control, the things that you can understand. And of course, some things are going to take work and research to start to understand. And some information is much more easily understood. And some of the stuff is really complicated. I've read a ton of filings in my career. I've looked through a ton of dilution. I don't understand every single scenario. Sometimes like it's really hard to read through what's really going on. And it really helps to follow smarter people on Twitter in those moments. But sometimes it's like perfectly laid out and it's very legible. And, whether it's a reverse merger and or like a company that's on phase 1B news, like I know phase 1B, I know what that is. I know that means you're very far away from getting your drug to market. I know that this news is not as significant as other newses can be, like a phase 3 or an FDA approval, right? Like that makes sense to me. Whereas reverse mergers with math and combinations of two different companies, like I don't really know where fair value is, and it might be extended, it might not be, So it's kind of how I take it, just with a grain of salt and do your best to understand. And if you can't understand, then you can't force yourself to understand.
Yeah, and not necessarily in the moment either. You can study and learn more, and that's the kind of tricky part with fundamentals in trading is that, news that you do understand, whether that be dilution or offerings or phase 2 or phase 3 news for biotechs. We've seen them go all sorts of directions. It's not a one size fits all where if this type of news comes out, the stock definitely goes up or definitely goes down. And that complicates the whole process even more, which is why we are primarily technical traders and who focus on price action first. So when we are at all confused with the fundamentals or what the news is, it's best just to avoid and accept that we don't know everything. And understand that the edge that we do have in the market is generally pretty small and that not all situations are going to fit it. So be patient for those plays to develop. Do you have any stocks you want to bring up for this week to kind of just hit broad spectrum that ones you're watching?
I don't have much of a watch list for today. Like I said, Friday, like I was really not excited about the market. I've been kind of putting all the big gappers on a list that we've seen in the past 2 weeks. I'm going to it right now. And a lot of them just are not in like a really good spot that I like need to make an action or a plan for it today. Obviously, the two biggest movers and daily charts from last week from a long bias perspective will be HUBC and ICU, which were great runners, great charts, and are taking breathers right now and have set up certain levels that, could be significant in the future. HUBC, just kind of starting with that one because I said it first. I haven't really taken a trade on this yet, but I will be watching that 80-cent level for, if we can sustain some volume. Again, continued narrative about what's going on here. I'm sure there's something forward-looking. I've been hearing on the street that there is forward-looking news here. So kind of like a buy the rumor, sell the news type situation, if you can understand it again. But past the catalyst, past the press release, the chart is very set up in a cute way. So I'll keep tabs on that. But again, like I don't think today is the day I need to buy it. I think more than likely it looks like more of a bounce short today than anything. But we'll see. It doesn't really have the range to really get me interested in the short. It's not really extended. It's just in this like weird construction. So, whichever way it comes out of, I am rooting for a breakout. I want this to go as high as possible. I think I'm way more excited to short this thing than buy a breakout. But it has to break out first if I'm going to short it. So,
yeah, and I think you bring up many good points. And those are the two main ones I have on my list as well. But it's just understanding that the majority of the time that we watch stocks, there isn't a trade to be had. And that's most mornings, most afternoons, most days of the week. If I'm watching HUBC really closely this week, that there might be a 10-minute window where I really think I have an edge in longing it. If it sets up, I could watch it all week and it never set up and I never take a trade on it. Same thing with ICU. It's a lot about, this is the type of stuff we write on our watch list is, if this happens, then I will do that. And we create those scenarios in our head and we, force the stock to fit a lot of the criteria that we need to take a trade so that we aren't constantly pushing buttons. So we're not, basically going from having an actual tradable edge to just gambling and trading every single day. There are traders who do really well who can trade every single move of a stock's life and do it really well in the short term. And they're scalping around, they're building in and out of a core. What me and Huddy do really well is take advantage of those moments when it makes a lot of sense and the odds are starting to stack in our favor. And this is kind of what I'm talking about having a lot more information. ICU's been trading since almost a full month now, where we have a lot of price action, a lot of levels to play off of, a lot of behavior to analyze from it. What were you going to say?
I forgot.
Nice.
But I do want to talk about ICU.
Talk about it.
Well, so it's just one of those things, like, the first thing Dom said is like, what are you watching? And I said, okay, well, what looks good from last week? And ICU from last week ended up being my biggest dollar gain of the week. And that's something I've been kind of following for, like what Dom just said, since October 2nd. Just, big percent gainer, traded massive volume. After it kind of topped off, after October 2nd topped out, it's not like I'm watching it every day, like every minute by minute tick. But, when it comes back with a PR and it starts trading 150 million shares, and I know its levels pretty well, I kind of know what I really want to do with it because I'm aware. Like I've already had my lines drawn on the chart. I know what the situation is. I know how bad the dilution. I know how bad their cash is. I know what the theme in the market is. It was a week where I really didn't want to push many buttons on the long biased account. I always say this, the win rate on a long biased account, for me at least, is really poor, but you get some amazing risk reward. In this case, I was risking like 3 pennies and I made practically 60 on at least half of the position. And so that was really good risk reward for that ticker. And it just reminds me that, like, when you have a big picture breakout setup where everything aligns, from market cap to volume to chart to overhead resistance, etc. Like it's so obvious that it's like I can't help but come out of retirement. And there's so many other breakout setups or range expansion setups where it's like you get all these questions about it, and it's like, yeah, I could see the argument, but like, am I 100% certain that I want to take that trade or like that I want to use this setup? And it's just always a great reminder that when you see a good one work, it's like, okay, that's where my eyes need to be, and understand that it doesn't come around very often. It's not like an everyday bang bang type of thing, right? But yeah, IC was a good one, and it's still trading good volume, and it is having consolidation days, and we'll see how it does around a buck. This thing has practically no cash. They need to do an offering. That doesn't mean we can really predict when. I mean, I'm sure you actually could predict by what time they have to do it, but that's not my strategy or specialty. I don't want to sit in something predicting offerings. I find like that's where you find big squeezes. We've seen a lot of crappy companies move lately. Kind of that theme right now. So not really wanting to swing short it, but just keep an eye on it, keep an eye on the volume and see how it reacts around these levels, because, it could break out again.
Yeah, and for me, there's just a lot of sitting back and waiting. We've had the big picture multi-week breakout on ICU. We've had a continuation move into the ones. We've technically had our first red day. So now it really just comes down to, where do we go from here? Do we consolidate over these 80, 90 cent areas and go on and break out again? Or do we continue to fade off into oblivion? And this was the last big liquid move out of this stock. All of that is really on the table. And that's kind of, as you evaluate stocks every single week and every single day and every night when you're making your watch list, is just realizing that all of the outcomes are possible. This could break out again. This could never touch $1 again. This could fade off to 70 cents today. There are so many different potentials, and that's why it's so important to understand which days and which preceding price action leads to the most possible outcome, and where you actually have a reasonable statistic to go off of that says, okay, now that we've seen this type of action over this many days, we have a better than 50% chance that this breaks out or fades off. And we're waiting for those moments. And the only way to get to those moments is to let the stock trade and to gain more information and let others pay for that information. so you are not losing money or gambling around in the process of learning that information that might affect trades down the line. HUBC for me is the same type of thing. Just sit back, wait. We know our levels. We know the situation that this is following. It's kind of on an island by itself now that PRZO is, and all the other ones, MTech, are all pretty much done for. So for this one, it's really clear, the levels, and it's just a time thing. Fade off and delete from the watch list, or hold up and maybe there's a play there. And well, that's how a lot of trading is, and I think that's the boring aspect that gets people in trouble. But it is the most reliable way to sit around, sit in cash, wait for those optimal setups at the right times, and then do the same process over and over again. Yerp. El Jefe asks, Dom, do you ever short? I do. I think I had the statistics before, and it was under 20% of the time, which makes sense in my mind. There are stretches where I do it a lot more. 2022 for sure, I did it a lot more often, and that's where my big gains came from. I tend really try to look at the market without a bias one way or the other, not like how can I long this or how can I short this, because when I do that, the really great short opportunities tend to just fall in your lap. You know, the stuff that Huddy talks about, the 3 green days without going red up 200% or whatever. Those become really obvious when you're not stalking them and trying to short every single day that the stock is up. But I just tend to go a lot smaller on shorts just because I'm not as comfortable. I don't see it from that side as clearly. But all right.
Yeah, you made a good point there. I mean, it's one thing to like be a short seller, and it's one thing to like patiently wait for short selling setups, right? Whereas like being a short seller, if you have a stock that's going on a multi-day run, it like might be the scenario where you're shorting every day that it's opening up green and spiking. You're shorting the spike and trying to cover the dip. Maybe you're taking paper cut losses and or making good gains. I mean, there are parabolics to be had and setups to be had intraday, to each their own. But there's also, you know, the type of traders that, you know, I'm more aligned with. That's more like a Jack Kellogg. And then what I'm more aligned with is let all the run happen, let the big picture show itself, and then come on the day where the odds are highestly stacked in my favor as a short seller. And I think that's where Dom kind of aligns, just like his, you know, big picture breakout setups. Like we're waiting for that day that specific day where we have huge edge. And, you know, it just takes patience.
Patience is the name of the game. But you can tell by the chat, by the lack of plays to talk about, generally slower week. Something important we are going to take with us as we continue down the road this week. Just, you know, like I said, overall market looks pretty weak. The gappers are nothing special. We do have some gappers, and they're moving. That one, the LMDX is at 300% now. And there's definitely stuff to continue watching and monitoring. But looks like a slow morning for me and Huddy. We will continue. Ooh, that was a burp. To evaluate going forward. Continue to take temperature of the market every single morning. And we will be live tomorrow morning, 8:45 a.m. right here on the Clover Trading YouTube channel. So here's hoping for a nice week. Hopefully liquidity picks up. Hopefully some plays do pop up out of nowhere. And if they are, we'll be ready to talk about them and hopefully be ready to execute. So thank you guys for joining us. We will see you in like 23 hours and 30 minutes tomorrow morning for another episode of Good Morning NASDAQ. Hope you guys all stay safe out there and have a great start to your week, one of the last weeks of October. So we'll see you guys tomorrow morning. That's